This meeting is being held electronically as per section 19.I of the town's procedural bylaw number 6228-19 as amended due to the COVID-19 situation. And may I have a motion to approve the agenda as circulated by legislative services? Sorry, hold on. I can't see because I have a big thing that just popped up. Anybody? Motion? Just need someone to, Crystal, seconder? Ashley, perfect. Any questions or comments on the agenda? So I actually think we did a little pre-thing. So all those in favor, I'll call the vote. Opposed? That carries. Declarations of pecuniary interest. There are none. I don't see any. No. Receipt of the minutes. May I have a motion to receive the minutes of September 22nd, 2021? Colin, second by, just need somebody to second it. Ashley, thank you very much. Any questions or comments about the minutes that we had? Previous meeting, we're all good? Perfect, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Any opposed? Nope, that carries. Okay, so matters for consideration 6.1. Memorandum for policy planner, the Green Development Standards consultation. May have a mover and a seconder to put the item on the floor for discussion. Sam, second by Councillor Gartner. Beautiful. Would staff like to speak to the item briefly? Mrs. Keel?
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Mayor, members of council, and the EAC. We've been waiting a long time to talk to you, so I'll get through this pretty efficiently. I'm going to share my screen very briefly. We did attach a presentation that is going to be much more thorough than the words I'm going to share with you in a couple minutes. Bear with me. Can everyone see my screen? Good. Okay. So first of all, thanks for having myself. I'm here joined with Nadia from Prime Research, our consultant on this project. So the town of Aurora is in the middle of creating a green development standard. This comes through some of our OP policies, some provincial policy in terms of power, but the emphasis is on creating a set of guidelines and rules that new development will have to adhere to. That includes town initiated projects, and the basic themes around the GDS are shown here. We have rules and regulations that will come towards energy, water, ecology, complete communities, and building materials. Right now, the intention is 2 phases of rollout. So we're in the middle of stakeholder consultation. We've met with a few different committees. We went to General Committee of Council last, I guess November 2nd. It felt like last week, was a few weeks ago now. And we're still getting feedback. We've met with some of our stakeholders, the build group, and some of the development community, as well as utility companies, conservation authorities. The intention is we would be rolling out our GDS phase 1 early next year. This says December, but it's probably going to be late January, early February. And phase 1 is very much surrounded. This is an example of energy. Mandatory criteria, and then a list of criteria above that that are a bit more flexible, but the developer would have the option of hitting certain criteria. So again, this is an energy example, but we've got these for each sub theme. And the intention for phase 1 is to sort of mend our way into this policy and give it a fighting chance in terms of pushback from the development industry. So a lot of these things we're already accepting as part of submission packages with new developments. We've just asked for a bit more strict criteria. So an example would be building above building code, 10% in some of our areas. So this full presentation, pardon me, is included in the attachments for tonight. Excuse me. Speaking too fast. And there are a lot more details contained within this. So I'm happy to take any questions. Essentially, phase 2 will come later, hopefully next year, perhaps the beginning of 2023, depending on council's decision to support this, but I'm sure we will have support. And phase 2 will be a lot more stringent, where we start pushing the envelope, asking for certain submission materials to be expanded upon. There's certain softwares and things that will be required from a staff review perspective. So getting things in line for that phase. So it'll give us a year to sort of unofficially pilot the GDS and then improve where we can, and so on and so forth. So happy to take any questions. There's a lot of material in the attachments. So if you have a chance later tonight or later this week or even next week and you want to provide comments, happy to take those as well. I'll put my email in the chat, but for now, does anyone have any initial questions? I know that was a lot in a short period of time.
Sam?
Yeah. Okay. First, my question. I have so many thoughts about this because I love it. But I guess my first thing is, how much of development is even left in Aurora to implement this plan on? Because it seems like I've lived here, born and raised, and I drive around now and I'm like, well, guess we're here. You know, there's no green space left unless we start going into Case Woodlot, which they tried, and all of these other things. So I love this. I love this. I think it's great. I think it's long past due, but how much room is there left to apply this? And are we just going to stick people who bought old buildings with new retrofit features, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, great question. Certainly Aurora has a lot of infill development, more than greenfield development. Anyone here would agree with you. The intention now is to hit all of that new development that's still coming in with the GDS, and in hopes that some things will be almost preparing themselves for retrofitting later on. So looking at something like district energy, say the promenade, for example, where you might have a 2 or 3 units parcel where you're completely redeveloping. There's potential infrastructure there that you can lay, that when subsequent units need upgrading later down the line, it would make it a lot easier to hook up to. So there are sort of strategies to kind of get around that. Certainly, I think we're going to hope to expand this in later phases to redevelopment. Right now, it only applies to new development, but redevelopment for sure. And I guess the hope and the spirit of the GDS is, yeah, for those limited infill developments that we're still creating in Aurora, we're setting them up for future readiness. That's one of the terms we've used quite a bit, is future preparing. So wherever we can do that to prepare for that, we absolutely will. So it's a great point, and something that we're looking at for sure. Thank you.
That's great. I have a second question, if I'm allowed.
Yep, go ahead, Sam.
Thanks. My other question is just, you talk about the building materials for these new these GDS, but what about, I'm wondering about the construction and demolition aspects of the landfill, because I know they contribute like 1/4 of Ontario's total land waste, basically, is development. So I was wondering if there is any looking at that, since there kind of is a provincial plan, kind of, sort of, province mentions it, but yeah, does that come into it, or are you just looking at the materials? Like, are we upcycling? Are we what are we doing?
That's a great question. So in terms of demolition for development, like existing development, this currently does not apply. One of the things we're looking at is in terms of materials and all the waste that comes with new development, because there are a lot of byproducts of materials that get discarded. That is part of the GDS. Another thing that we're looking at with building materials is some of those things are being upcycled. Masonry is a perfect example where a lot of the different materials can be fully recycled in terms of other products. I think where we look at redevelopments, my earlier point in your first question, I think that's a great way that we can ensure that we're disposing of demolished materials properly, and potentially incorporating those same demolished materials into the same building materials that are being used in situ. So It's a good point. I'm making notes. I'm not on my phone when I'm down here, but that's something we'll bring back to the stakeholders in the steering committee for sure. Yeah, thank you.
No worries. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Matthew. Perfect. Thanks. Any other comments or questions for Matthew or Natalie? Now there was 4 buckets there, and I was just hoping, Matthew, if you could just maybe pull up each screen just quickly so you can kind of, I guess, kind of like go to each bucket and kind of separate exactly what we're looking at trying to achieve. Is there anything that anybody has any comments in respect to the is it 4 buckets or 5? There was water, energy, the ecology, there's energy, the complete communities, and waste materials. So just trying to kind of spawn your, I guess, your memory, because it was a rather large document. Was there anything in specific within those buckets that you felt that were not achievable, or something that maybe we could look into that would be more appropriate for a developer to kind of engage that developer to want to do and achieve these things? Anybody? So I can't see the panel, so I have to scroll. So everybody loved this document. That's great. I love it. All right. Well, if there's no other comments or questions, then I'll call the vote. Is all those in favor of the?
Excuse me, Madam Chair. I have my hand up.
Okay, sorry. Maybe you could stop the screen share. I can see the panel just because I have to keep scrolling down the little strip in order to see everybody. So, Councillor Gartner.
Thank you. In response to Sam's question, we still have some development left. We've got development on Leslie Street. We have a big area at Bayview and Wellington, the Magna lands that have been sold for development. Rachel, can you think of anything else? Oh, I mean, we've got an infill going on just next to Hillary House, which has the potential to be a lot of units. There's proposals for the area by the railway station, the GO station that's on the west side. That area, I think, well, that's more your area, Rachel. I think that's going to be developed. So I don't know if that would be called infill development, but there is still quite a lot of development that's going to be going on. Lisa, can you add anything? Have I missed anything?
Lisa?
And through you, Madam Chair, the spots that you mentioned are correct. There's a couple other, because this does apply to all new development, which would also include the Addison Park and in the business park in the commercial area as well. But again, it's new development, and then we would look to implement later on for redevelopment, which would capture some of our older buildings.
Right. So, I mean, we aren't, it's called built out. We aren't at built out yet, but, you know, it's unfortunate that we didn't do this, you know, couldn't have done this earlier. It was in our official plan from 2010. So, but we're here and there's still quite a lot we can do, I think. And, question, oh, first of all, I don't know if you've done it, Rachel, I came in late. We have 3 staff here tonight. We've got Lisa and Natalie and Sarah Tinkamp, who's manager of Parks and Fleet. Is that your title, Sarah? Yes. So that's a lot of staff for a committee meeting, Rachel. We're doing well tonight. But I did want to ask, because I had when this came to council, I know from, I've done a little bit of investigation into Passive House. I don't know if anybody, and what they say are the 2 most important things for building and for retrofit are windows and insulation. And so I raised this point at council because this is way, way down the list. I think it's, I can't remember, tier tier 3 or tier 4. So to the consultants, are we going to try and raise that up in what we would like developers to do? Because that would be so energy efficient and cost efficient for residents. And, you know, the developers are just going to pass these costs on to the people who buy the homes. So at least this is a cost they would pass on, but then people would hopefully save a lot of money in the future. So to the consultants, did that get moved up in the list?
Matthew?
Yeah,
Matthew.
that's okay.
Or Natalie?
No,
I was gonna say-
Matthew, I would be.
Sure. Yeah. So the presentation you're seeing now, just because it had to be uploaded a bit earlier, is the same presentation that we did deliver to GC. So we have worked some things around, and I'm happy to share that with you, Councillor Gardner, as promised. So to answer your question specifically, yes, it has been bumped up, and it is also part of the 10%. I think one of the first energy numbers in tier 1 is above code 10%. And so one of the things we're including is sort of a handbook to developers in terms of how they can achieve certain metrics. And part of that will stress that insulation and windows are one of the two, like you said, easiest ways to achieve that and go above code. So that will be a main focus in the handbook. But happy to share that more.
Thanks, that would be great. But both Rachel and I know that if it's not in the building code, we can't force the developers to do that. So are they going to just do it? Or is the building code, I mean, is it going to have another update because of climate change implications?
Another good question. I think the building code was just recently updated, and from what I understand, it wasn't substantial in terms of environmental consciousness. So that is one of the challenges we've acknowledged. It is going to be difficult. Phase 1 of the GDS will be a little less pushy in terms of how we can entice development communities to adhere to things. We're going to ask. We've put the GDS out there in a way that we're asking them to meet that minimum criteria. Phase 2, however, when we start tying in incentives, I think will be a valuable tool to kind of get developers on board quicker in terms of meeting these criteria. But I think we can be picky and choosy too with the development that we accept and make sure that we're getting what we want in Aurora in terms of our future. So that's part of it, I guess.
I wish. Thank you. Picky and choosy. I'm quoting you on that. To the committee members, when I first saw this report, it was daunting, but it's worth a read, and further comments if you have to Matthew. I mean, take your time. It's substantial. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Gardner. Sam, I saw you had your hand up earlier. Did you have additional comments to add? Go ahead.
Always, Councillor. Okay. Sorry, I'm taking so this is I've been waiting so long to talk about green development on this council. I have 3 more points. 1, what is the actual timeline of implementing these GSTs? Because in your it says early first quarter next year, which is great. But what does that mean in translation to applying it? Because I understand you have to do stakeholder, you got to test it out. But in terms of actually, if all of that is successful, going and talking to developers, what is the timeline for that? Because I know development often happens on like a 5-10 year, however long basis. So are we implementing those into all of, like Councillor Gardner said, like all of the developments that are left? We're incorporating them. Are we doing it now for the ones that are being ripped up across from Walmart? Like, what are we talking in terms of application?
Matthew?
Yeah, so great question. Through you, Chair. I think the implementation is slotted for the end of January, and we're going to start training staff mid-January. We were already testing on current applications. It's kind of tricky with the zoning and the application process in terms of planning, where you're getting plans coming in 2 or 3 years before building permits are pulled. So we'll be looking at new planning applications for sure. I don't think that we can go back anything that's already through the draft approval process. I don't think we can. But that being said, I think we can provide these resources to any ongoing developments and say, hey, if there's a chance for you to switch something up here before you pull building permit, go ahead and do it. Great. But essentially it would have to be applied to new applications. Yeah.
Sam?
That's great. Thank
Any other
you.
questions?
Oh yeah, 2 more. These are quicker. Second, in the water part of it, I just flipped through quickly again, refreshing. I'm a little worried about stormwater and the sewer system, and especially watching what's happening in BC and Nova Scotia right now, and knowing about the potential for climate change in the future. I'm very worried about all of these new developments, and what if we get a sudden downpour? Where is all the water going? Especially when I look on my street and everyone and their uncle is blowing their leaves out, not realizing those block the sewer grates. So how are we, that's just like more of a food for thought kind of comment than like, I expect you to have an answer. But that is something I've been thinking about a lot. And I thought about that's not quite mentioned, because water management, as I'm sure you know, in development is a killer. It's horrible. If you don't do it properly, that is. So that's good for that. And my last thought is, I'm wondering if there was any overlap that, I forget who, someone was mentioning concerns over the developers wanting to do these things. And I was thinking about the last meeting I attended 2 meetings ago. We were talking about pollinator gardens and tree planting and the town's funds for those. And I'm wondering if there would be any opportunity for overlap to combine the funding for the pollinator gardens, maybe rain gardens, filling those native plant quotas in the ecology part, but also obviously everyone loves spending not their own money. But if the town already had a pot of money, could be maybe 2 birds, 1 net, as a birder once told me, kind of thing. So that's just my other thought, maybe some overlap we can get and then we're working with developers.
Natalie, did you want to take on the stormwater management part? Because I know that came up in the preliminary meetings with the stakeholders.
Yeah, so I'm not a stormwater management expert, but being part of the committee, there was heavy discussion on the concerns that you just brought out about stormwater management and climate change and what to expect. So there was discussion on low impact development strategies and green infrastructure to implement within the GDS. So I do believe that's part of the water section for the GDS. And then in addition to what's happening in the GDS, a separate project that is ongoing and will eventually come to this committee for discussion is our climate change adaptation plan. So we have consultants working with town staff on evaluating all of our town infrastructure, including stormwater infrastructure and its vulnerability to climate change. So, part of the assessment was to start off on assessing what kind of climate change we would expect here in Aurora. Not the same kind of climate change we are seeing in BC, thankfully. But we are going to be experiencing and are experiencing some climate change here as well. And so that's a big piece of that project, in assessing all of our infrastructure and identifying any infrastructure that might be vulnerable to changes. So we're looking at stormwater infrastructure, water, wastewater, we're looking at our parks and natural heritage, facilities, roads. So all of that will be assessed, and once more vulnerable infrastructure is identified, a type of adaptation plan will be put to increase its resiliency to climate change. So it is being looked at, and it will come to this group sometime
soon.
Yeah, in the spring, I'm gonna say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Natalie. Appreciate it. As far as the pollinators and the funding and that, we happen to have Ms. T Camp here. I don't know if that would be your wheelhouse to kind of talk about, and as far as partnering with developers and creating an ecological rain garden of some sorts, and partnering as far as the town with the gardens, would that be something that you could speak to, or is that Matthew? I'm not sure.
I can comment on that quickly. So as part of the incentive phase, I think we're going to be looking for federal and provincial grants where we can say to a developer something like, hey, instead of you doing your own landscaping and holdbacks for tree plantings and so on and so forth, we're going to give you access to urban, or provide you resources to access this grant that will assist with your programming. In terms of the actual concepts, some of the bioswale stuff that we're looking at in terms of stormwater management within some of these plans should kind of take on two birds with one stone in terms of having green plantings that also serve a functional purpose in terms of water. So I don't know, Sarah, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I was basically gonna speak about the LIDs and how these bioswales and rain gardens will facilitate pollinators and many other native species of trees and shrubs. So I think that's perfect opportunity for that. And as we redevelop stormwater ponds as well, same thing, the opportunity lies there. So
Great. Thanks so much. Any other comments or questions before we move on? Councillor Gartner?
Thank you. To the committee, Rachel and I had at least one opportunity to hear Blair Feltmate speak. He's all about climate change, and I heard him on CBC radio last week, and it's called Intact. It's the insurance company, INTACT, I think it is, Intact Climate Change Adaptation Center. And I can't find it now, but I'm not good at this. But when I looked at it after I heard him on CBC, there's a free list of ways that we can protect our own homes in our areas. Interestingly, Sam, one of them was cleaning out the leaves from the drainage areas. But he's amazing. His last name is Feltmate. He's amazing, and Rachel and I got a lot of just education listening to him. And I think you might find this website interesting.
Thanks. Thank you. Yeah, no, he was great. So if you want to look him up, I'm sure he'd be easily Googled. Thanks so much, everybody. Does anybody else have any questions or comments at all? No, we're good. Well, thank you very much. If there's no further comments, I'll call the vote. Is all those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Thank you so much, Matthew. Appreciate it. Item 6.2, manager from the Economic Development Policy Streetscapes Needs Assessment. May I have a mover and a seconder to put the item on the floor for discussion? Barry, second by, Crystal. Thank you very much. Would staff like to speak to this item briefly? We're doing pretty good on time here.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. So through you, Madam Chair, I appreciate being here tonight. What we've brought forward and put through in a memo is an update to the 2013 streetscape. streetscape plan that came through in the Aurora Promenade secondary plan. And again, this was back in 2013. And real quickly, as we go through, this is one of our last group consultations through committee. And with me tonight is Janine Seek. She's our U of T student who has been dubiously taking all my notes for me. So I appreciate her being here. And we'll be sharing these also with the official plan review group that is working through the Aurora Promenade secondary plan. So all of our notes and comments will get shared with that group. So tonight really is just an open discussion on things that you would like to see in the streetscape as we update a particular space. I'm just going to quickly just share my screen just to give you the subject area view. So the entire, can you see that okay? So the entire promenade area initially in the 2013 streetscape plan included everything. So it's quite a large area. And then further then it went to just in the immediate, like the downtown historic area. But to get a real sense and to kind of take bite-sized pieces of how we can update and animate the space, we've looked at a subject area from Wellington south down to Church Street. So with that type of area in mind, we've been to the different consultation groups and committees, including accessibility and heritage, and of course the environmental group, and also our community advisory group, along with our business group. So we've been around and getting a ton of ideas and things that people would like to see. So with that in mind, that's really, really open now through you, Chair, to just really share some ideas of what you would like to see and maybe some things that you would not like to see down there.
Thank you, Ms. House. Does the committee have any questions or comments about the promenade streetscape? Councillor Gartner?
Thank you. I had one comment when the consultant called me, and that is trees. But actually it's pretty tricky because we heard at council that there's so many underground services that we can't dig down and plant trees. So we're going to have to be very creative, Lisa. Trees in great big pots. I mean, you know, trees that might, because just trees just, and Rachel's the tree person. I mean, they add so much ambiance and shade. We're really going to need shade with climate change in the summer. We're probably not going to be able to get big enough trees that are going to do much to purify the air. But certainly the look and feel of the place and mitigation of the heat will be, you know, if we can do that, then that's great. That's it.
Thanks, Councillor Gartner. Any other input? Barry?
On the issue of trees, I come across the, I guess it's the new industry standard called silva cells. That's a patent name for the system that is being used in a lot of instances in which the sidewalks are elevated, held up by cells, you know, prefabricated components that actually provide room for dirt, for soil, for nutrition. However, it appears from what I've looked at that the engineering required is a total realignment of underground services. So it's a very expensive process to retrofit. It's great if you're going from scratch. Up in Newmarket, their Young Street and Davis Drive work, that was basically from scratch in a lot of areas, and they were able to use the silva cells technology to great advantage. Squeezing it in our Young Street sidewalk area, I don't know if that's a viable option. If it were to be used, it would require so much re-engineering of our underground services. I don't know if that's viable. Can someone from the town comment specifically on the technology problems?
So thank you, and through the chair, one of the reasons that we have Sarah on as the steering committee is exactly that. Some of the things that we've heard through consultation, and one of the terms I've heard is the tree coffins versus tree planting and keeping live trees. And part of it is the engineering side and making sure that you build something that's viable for the trees and not that it looks good for a year before they die. As the part of this project is to lead into new and upgraded light fixtures along that stretch, which will tap into the infrastructure below. So really, we just want to kind of gather the ideas, and trees have come up in every single one of them. So whatever we do, we have to try to figure out how we're going to make that happen. And I get to use my partner, Sarah, on that one. She's like, I'm so glad.
I sign in, Ms. Camp.
No, I mean, I agree. It is about providing them the environment that they need to sustain longevity, and to think about it short term is a mistake on all of our parts, if that's the case. But it is a very expensive and costly endeavor to do it properly. Barry's right. There's a myriad of infrastructure underneath the sidewalks and in the Yonge Street corridor. So it's going to take some real long-term planning and foresight to put together a proper promenade if we're going to include that sort of infrastructure. They need to be, rather than just individual, the best way to do it is to provide like a grouping of 3 trees or even 4, because it maximizes the in-ground soil capacity and ability for them to thrive. So yeah, it's just some real long-term planning, and I think we can certainly achieve what we want. But it's being at this committee and getting the input from residents and staff and all the stakeholders, and that's what's going to drive this project forward in the future.
Thanks,
along the way of trees, and in particular for this group, our thoughts on other ways that we can capture the green piece within that area, such like green walls, green accents that are maybe not necessarily digging into that infrastructure below. But I'd love to hear any thoughts or things that you've seen.
Thanks, Lisa. Sam?
To remember to unmute myself. The first thing on that is, I think I lived in Halifax for a while and was involved with one of their community gardens, and they set up a sensory garden, which is really cool because you could do it vertically, because I also went to a university with a green wall, and they suck to maintain. They always leak, and they're very expensive. But similar to that, you can do like basically a sensory garden wall, because all you need is little potted herbs and things like that. So it's kind of a cheap, easy, effective vertical greening. I mean, ivies are always cool. The only thing I don't want to see, which was my original thought, is the beautiful brickwork that immediately gets frost heaved. That Aurora loves to do on the pedestrian crosswalks, that always gets asphalted over in the spring. So I would just love to see that skipped over this time, if you're messing with the crosswalks. And my last point is about the trees. Are we looking at other alternatives? Like, I know tall grasses, or people hate them, but they're cool bird habitat, they're effective. And obviously, I'm sure Ms. Camp knows, like the dogwoods and willows and some of those more potentially shallow root systems. Is there a way to like intersperse them with the trees? Because I'm not a huge vegetation person, but I know they're used quite frequently in restoration because they're great at absorbing water. They have shallow, blah, 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 whatever. They're borderline indestructible for a plant. So I was just wondering if there was a way to like minimize cost by shaking it up, by spreading out the trees a little more, within pollination distance, of course, depending on the tree, all that. But greening it up with some different greenery, I guess.
Yeah, I think just from that standpoint, it's the having something long-term and year-round. You know, as you can appreciate, some of the smaller shrubs and things, you don't get that full effect of a tree canopy. Trees can be they can calm traffic as well. So if having them, if the objective is to bring people to the downtown core and have them stop and enjoy it, and even to calm traffic and have people slow down, trees really do have that effect. And you're not going to achieve that necessarily with a smaller stature shrub, even though, as you said, they provide an essential part of the ecosystem and have some value. But it's certainly, if there were trees planted, you could have understory shrubs or something interspersed between them, right? Especially if we were doing like a long planting bed, you know, then that's long-term future planning. In the short term, I mean, there's many more areas for us to put planters and hanging baskets and things for, you know, our 7-8 months of growing season. And, you know, some of the infill projects that are going in, they are providing trees on their frontages and things, which will definitely add to the area, especially the United Church. There's a fairly nice planting plan that's going along with that. So I think it's just some long-term planning that's really going to bring the trees into effect. It's just right now for this oversight of the project and the light poles and things, it's a little more shorter term perspective.
Thanks, Sarah. Sam, any follow-up?
No, that's great. I was thinking alongside of like trees are obviously the ideal. They're just expensive and I recognize that. So I was thinking if it could like push the trees from the 6-foot distance that's normal to like a 10-foot distance and throw in a dogwood in there. I don't know. The other thing is just if you're switching over the lights, obviously LED are great. They're also blinding. So that's something I've noticed a lot with like the new cars is just every LED seems to be like at 1,000 watts. So I just think about that when you're buying new light bulbs, honestly.
Thanks, Sam. Any other comments, questions? Ms. Keel?
I just was wondering, Lisa, I found that there's a lot of overlap with like the similar objectives with this project and the active transportation master plan that's underway. So I'm just wondering if you're connecting with Michael Batt on, you know, some of the needs from this project and, you know, what he's working on in the active transportation.
Yes, so through you, Madam Chair, yes, for sure. I'm part of that committee group as well. So kind of tied into that. One of the biggest things that came out of the initial discussion was the traffic flow through that area, and you know it leads to environment and pollution in the area, and also through the accessibility committee. They were talking about vibration and so forth coming through that same stretch. And it's all tied into active transportation of how can we animate the space and make it safe. And safety was the #1 piece coming through that section. So yeah, no, it's an excellent point, and I'm in direct email there with that group and making sure we're on the same page.
Great.
Thanks. Colin, you had a question.
Yes, a couple of questions. Is there any plan for bike lanes through that area?
Ms. House?
So thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. What we're looking at is the full. What we're looking is from building to building. There's a finite space, and we've heard. Sorry, my dog is going to bark in 2 seconds. Sorry, he has a very loud one. I don't want to interrupt. So what we're looking at is from the building front to the building front and how much space we have within that area. And right now with 4 lanes of traffic and the 2 sidewalks, what we've heard loud and clear in every committee group is that the sidewalk is too small. And how do we use that same space to the most effective and efficient use? And through the active transportation, we're also talking, how do you connect cyclists to the GO station, to the town park, to the old historic area, and make it safe for them. So it's definitely on our radar and how we can utilize the space best. And again, it goes back to Natalie's piece with the active transportation group. So we're looking at it for sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Colin, follow up?
No, not on that. That's fine. I mean, it seems like a very cramped area. I'm having troubles visualizing biking, and other than, you know, maybe buying some land from current property owners, because I think cyclists want to be, want to feel that there's some distance between them and the cars. And the more distance, the better. And even better still is a barrier of some sort. But I don't really know, like I have troubles visualizing that. And the other question I had was, is there somebody who's going to put together a drawing or a schematic diagram for as a concept of this is what we want maybe it's been done already, and if it has, I apologize, but this is what we want it to look like when it's all said and done. Like I can imagine you building you know, huge cement areas where you put dirt and plant some sort of tree in them, but I'm just wondering if anyone's gone that far to do a drawing, or this is our proposal.
Ms. House?
Yes, so through you, Madam Chair, for sure, we have the planning partnership, our consultants working on this plan. They've also are the originators of the 2013 plan, and they've also been heavily involved in the town square project. So we're trying, because they have the background and they're marrying all those ideas together. So after this, Janine will be putting together all the comments that we've heard from the groups. That'll go over to the planning partnership, and they will be doing a detailed design. We've already supplied with them all the CAD drawings of the street and the cross sections, and they'll be comparing that to the 2013 drawings. And we'll be able to circulate that back to the group just so you can take a look and see what they're proposing, and it'll go back to council early January is what we're hoping now.
Colin?
No, that's great. Thank you very much.
Sure. Any other questions or comments? No, I had a couple just when I was asked the question. We haven't really touched on it yet, and that was you know, thinking about, you know, attracting people to our downtown core and revitalizing it, and looking at this as an opportunity to make this an example of what a greenscape can look like. So one of the questions the consultant had asked me was, you know, about the sidewalks and materials and stuff. And I'm like, wouldn't this be a great opportunity if it was in the budget, you know, to show what a permeable surface would look like? When I was at one of the conferences in 2019, there was plenty of products that were very innovative that I discovered that looked like interlock brick, but maybe there's big pavers, I don't know, but that you throw water on it, it would just like absorb right down. So just these interesting little concepts. If we are going to make an investment and you want to attract people, why not show what that looks like? And if there's opportunity, we're going to redo things. I just think it would be an interesting way to kind of attract people and make it beautiful in a climate adaptive method. And with, you know, Mitchell's Alley, having a little bit of extra space there, you know, is there opportunity to invest in level 3 chargers and make it a destination? I don't know about you guys, I'll throw it out there, but from what I've heard, people who have, I'm going to say a Tesla, but it could be another high-end car. They go out of their way to make these little trips to certain towns and say, okay, well, we're going to go to this little town. They'll do a map because they have a level 3 charger, and they kind of make a day trip out of it and make it kind of fun and interesting. And wouldn't it be kind of cool if we were to have some level 3 chargers in our downtown core to kind of create that little bit of a loop? And within that, there'll be some EV chargers, some green development, whether it's you know, a garden wall, the permeable surfaces, the plants, maybe some trees. If we can't do trees, maybe where we put that money is with the permeable surface. So just creating some examples of how that greening can look. So I'm just kind of throwing it out there. If anybody else has any thing to add to that, I'd really love to hear your opinion on that. Colin?
Yeah, I would just like to talk about the EV chargers. I think it's great that we've got EV chargers in the town now, but as a user, I find, I wonder if we can rethink that or do it a different way, because you need to have an app and you go through another company And every time I go to one of these things, I see people phoning up the company, oh, how do I get it connected, or how do I get it started? And it's just too cumbersome. And I know, and I don't really care. Like I'm going to charge my car at my house. I'm not going to go use the town charger. But I don't understand why we wouldn't just do that. Make it like Niagara in the Lake has, or if that's our goal to have ourselves as a destination. St. Catharines, other places. It's free. You just go there. There's conservation authorities that do that as well. So if we really want to be a destination, I think we should rethink that. And I wish we can make it simpler for people who do go to use these chargers, that you don't have to have an app and download it and it never works. And people end up phoning the company. Oh, could you please connect me? Oh, yes, we'll turn you on. It's just too much trouble. It should just be a matter of picking it up and plugging it in like it is when you gas up your car. And if you had a credit card, maybe you could pay that way without going through some third company. So that's a problem. I think maybe it's just a growing pain, but I think it should be made simpler somehow. But I like the idea of making Aurora a destination. I think Newmarket's done a nice job. And one reason is they're not the main artery. Like our roads are the main arteries. And I don't know if we can change that, but Yonge and Wellington are our two main arteries. And if we want to have a cute little area, we should be trying to figure out a way, well, how do we make that those two, not the main arteries, have the main arteries somewhere else? Those are my
Sorry, thank you very much, Colin. Ms. Keel, I don't know if you want to kind of touch on that because we have already invested in an EV charging company called Ivy. And I don't know if it's any different from the experience that Colin has experienced, but I don't know if you have any comments.
Well, the first is just a comment. I think you mentioned Burlington having them free. I think that was their council decision that they would subsidize those chargers and provide that as a service to residents, to tourists. That was a strategy that they put together. The strategy here was to make it a cost neutral program. So we needed funds to supplement the costs. So that's why we're charging people for their use. This is the first that I hear about any kind of issues with the app. I mean, it is new. They just, Ivy just came in here in Aurora. It's been like 2 months. And same with Newmarket, they're under the same Ivy program. So there might be some growing pains in terms of people getting used to the app, but if they live here and use those charger regularly, they're going to want to download the app, right? So once they're connected, I think it's smoother after the first time. So I do agree that maybe it's cumbersome the first time, but once they got the app going and they're registered, what I've heard from staff who've used it, it's pretty straightforward.
Thanks, Natalie. Colin?
Yeah, no, and I think it could very well be a political decision that we want it to be cost neutral, but it would be nice if there was a method that we could eliminate the middle company, because I think it's more expensive for somebody to charge their car there than it would be for them to do it at their own house. So again, if our goal is to encourage that behavior, or if our goal is to encourage people to come and visit with their electric cars, then that's not going to work. And I often go to the town park. I like the area, I like the Armory restaurant there and that sort of thing. And I never see anyone using the chargers. Like, on the weekend, at the farmer's market, they just don't use them. And I went to just try it as an experiment, and I thought, it's too much trouble. I'm not gonna invest any more time in this. So if we want people to use it, it should be easy. I don't mind the town not paying for it, but it shouldn't cost people more than to charge their car at home. And I think if we really want it to be and this is a political decision, it's nothing to do with implementing it. But if we want to encourage people to come and visit the town, then making them use this app and pay more for the electricity, I don't think is the way to go. So it's more for council.
I think we're getting a little bit off topic, but I'll just finish with the last thing. So just so that you understand that the cost that anyone will have to pay is a few things. One is the electricity cost, and the town pays more for electricity than you would at home, especially if you're doing an overnight charge. So we do have a significant, electricity cost that we have to, consider. There's the infrastructure costs that we have to pay for, the maintenance and the servicing and the network fees. So those are all like extra fees that a homeowner wouldn't have to normally pay. So there is quite a few costs associated. And the goal of having these chargers wasn't to be, was to provide the infrastructure for the residents and businesses. But also it's more of a top-up type of charge. It's not meant to be the main place where one would charge their vehicle. Like you said, it's a lot cheaper to do that at home, where you're paying like overnight residential rates, which are really cheap or cheaper relatively. So, that's the reason. We're not trying to make money off of it. We're just trying to, recoup the overall operating costs of the program. So yeah, that's the main objective.
Thanks, Natalie. And yeah, we'll move on, but I was really specific to the level 3, which is a supercharge, which is a lot more expensive than a level 2 or a level 1. And I was just really looking at that as a component, as something attractive, but we'll move away from that for now. Anybody else have any questions or comments about the streetscape plan and any opinions on that? We're good. Oh, Ms. Howes?
Sorry, I'll just add, we didn't get a lot into further technology, but if you have ideas or suggestions or things that you've seen in other areas, in any of the areas, whether it's green or new technologies, Councillor Gillian, I'd like to hear your list of things that you've seen before. That would be great to add to our want list. Lastly, we do have an engageaurora.ca/downtown streetscape. So if you have other ideas or if anyone that you know would want to submit ideas, please do so. My contact is on that page as well. Thank you. And thank you, Sarah, for pitching in too.
Thank you, Ms. Howes. And maybe you could put that Engage Aurora link in the chat. And if anybody wants to copy and paste that for themselves, that would be great. Thank you. Okay, so I need no other further comments or questions, then I guess I will call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Great. Well, thank you very much, Ms. House. Appreciate your presentation tonight.
Thank you.
Okay, so last item, 6.3, memorandum from Manager Parks and Fleet. Ms. Tekamp on the LDD Lamantria dispar control options. May I have a mover and a seconder to put the item on the floor for discussion. Crystal and Sandy. Perfect. Would staff like to speak to the item briefly, please?
Through you, Madam Chair. Thank you for having me tonight. This report is just a bit of background on LDD, how it's affected Aurora in the last couple of years, and some control options that we will be bringing to council for their consideration. There are a number of LDD first appeared in Aurora back in the early 90s. There was a significant outbreak of them at that time, specifically down the same area that we've been seeing LDD predominantly this year. And it's in the Casewood area. So Henderson, Bathurst, kind of everywhere west of Yonge in the south end of town is where there's been a large population of them. So last year we started in 2020, we saw some instances of them along with other municipalities in the region. And we did an egg mass count kind of to establish what this year's thresholds would be for them. They were reporting severe infestations, and from what we saw out there, and you as residents and council, they were fairly significant in some pockets of town. So This report gives some control options. Last year, or in 2020, the town had a fairly robust communication plan. We sent out numerous social media, message boards. There were videos and things, and each we talked to informed residents about their life cycles, things that they could do to mitigate them, and how they could improve the health after the of their trees once the caterpillar had defoliated some of their trees. So we handed out burlap as a result. It was a really successful program, a lot of great feedback. I think people were really happy to interact with staff because we did it in person at the JOC. A lot of information got out there as a result. So we're looking to do that again next year. But we've also included information about aerial spraying, ground spraying, just additional street sweeping, injections of trees. That's another option versus aerial spraying or ground spraying. There is also information provided about egg mass removal. So that's really what the report's about. So we're just looking for your feedback and your perspective, and here to answer any questions.
Thanks, Ms. Camp. Anybody have any questions or comments about the options that were provided for LDD control? Any kind of preferred methods? Barry?
Yeah, I know what's in the report is basically the town-wide approach. In other words, dealing with streets and blocks and whole areas of town. I found last year on the small scale, it was almost similar to the home approach. Where I live, we had a couple of walnut trees where there was a heavy infestation. Also, I have the adoptive park down at Lions Park at the end of Reuben Street. And I planted a couple of years ago a number of oak trees, which is premium fodder for these guys to munch on. I found from a kind of like a manual approach, tree by tree, I was using a couple of oils, peppermint oil, tea tree oil, a small amount with basic carrier of water with a bit of soap. And I would have to go there daily, basically, to apply it to the trunk. But I found toward the end of the problem period that I was wearing rubber gloves, and I gathered 5 or 6 of their little corpses, little bodies, crushed them, and smeared their body juice, if you would, on the trunk. And I observed through the course of the days the same repellent effect as the oils. But that's basically a garden approach. It's not a town-wide approach. So I don't know how much use that is. Thank you.
Thanks, Barry. It was very interesting. I haven't heard that. Anybody else have any comments? Ashley?
I think that the burlap was a great method, because I know a lot of my neighbors, they heard about it, but I think when they went, they were actually sold out of burlap, or not sold out, but the burlap was all gone. So I think definitely having more of that this year, because the solution that people were coming up with was putting the duct tape instead, which was probably more problematic. So I think, yeah, just having more of the burlap and maybe setting it out a bit earlier so people can kind of prepare that LDD season is coming. So here's your burlap, and just as soon as possible. Because I know people, like I said, our neighbors went and they're like, it's all gone. So that's all really.
Thanks, Ashley. Anybody else? I know there was quite a few options about the different kinds of spray, triazine and then BTK. What did you guys think about? I know there were some things in the report that talked about each of them. Obviously, the cost of it's really expensive, but one was not really highly recommended because it can affect other species and insects like other butterflies and such. So I don't know what your thoughts were. I think that was the BTK, and then the triazine is I think it's a lot of manual labor, but it's something that we could do. But what was your thoughts on that? Anybody have any comments on that? No? Well, myself, as far as the burlap, I love the burlap that we had going on to educate the residents. The one thing that I did notice within the area is that a lot of people were successful in putting the burlap on, but then once they got the burlap on, they didn't really know what to do. So I noticed a lot of people weren't actually lifting it up and harvesting the caterpillars. They just thought that kind of just did the job. It's education, right? So it's the first time you're applying it, you throw it on, you think everything's all good and you leave it. But the reality is you have to go and shake those things off at least every day or every other day. I know that's what I had done, and I was always shocked how many that I could take down. I probably would harvest anywhere between 25 and 100 a day. And I also noticed some people putting duct tape up. They would put it up the wrong way. So there would be no sticky part at all. So it was kind of useless. And just obviously the time of the year. So, you know, I did notice some people would have their duct tape or whatever up well beyond that was even worthwhile. And so it's like, you're just kind of wasting your time putting it there. So I do think that the burlap was a great program. I just think an extension of the education, whether it's like when you get the piece of burlap and you take it home, maybe there's like a little piece of paper that's stapled to it that has a QR code that launches like a video of like what you're supposed to do with it. And it could be the one that I know the Toronto Conservation Authority had one released on what to do. And maybe some other conservation authorities have kind of adopted that as well. So it's an educational piece. So we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We don't have to do our own video. It's already there for everybody to use. And so when it is released, you can say, here's the video launch. It tells you what to do. So you're just not simply throwing the burlap up and catching those few. So that would be kind of something that I would like to see a little bit more of. And there was another option. What was the last one here? The egg mass removals. So again, I think that kind of fell on deaf ears because people didn't really know what that meant or what that looked at. And then it became kind of intimidating. So you kind of think, oh, like there's this pupae and how am I going to like take this thing off? And then it becomes out of sight, out of mind, and life goes on. Myself, when I had done it, I realized how easy it was. And hopefully it's very effective and I reap the results of it. But again, it could be just something that, you know, we're gearing up educationally. I think last year we agreed, or it was this year actually, when we agreed with the invasive species and such, and educational, with whether it's at the farmers market or wherever, there are really good opportunities in advance to kind of educate people to know what to do, and having some sort of like video or demonstration, like again, the QR, I think it kind of, that visual learning gets people thinking about it. That would be kind of like my feedback on the educational piece. I think it's something we definitely should do. As far as the aerial spraying, I find it extremely expensive. I'm not so sure that is something that I feel that as a municipality, I would want to assume those costs. So I would like to ask staff just about, the spraying kind of mechanisms, whether it's triazine or whether it's BTK, as far as like, looking at the provincial government and the federal government, or even the Ministry of Environment or Fisheries or whatnot, like what is the feedback there? And as far as, what their contribution to mitigation, because I do think this does kind of cross paths on different levels of government and where we're getting that funding support and that mitigation support. So if maybe Sarah, maybe you can kind of touch on that a little bit, because I feel like there's some responsibility on them as well. So it doesn't all fall on the municipality.
Yeah, so through you, Madam Chair, I'm not aware of any programs that either provincially or federally are provided. Certainly, I would believe it would fall under provincial jurisdiction if it was. While the province has seen it as certainly widespread and the largest spike in LDD defoliation in the last 30, 40 years. They don't see them as a threat per se, like emerald ash borer. So emerald ash borer is definitively, it's an invasive that kills. So it will kill trees dead. So LDD is more of an insect that they look at is a nuisance. I mean, yes, it defoliates, it's not pleasant. I mean, as you said, you know, removing them from burlap is like a horrible job. They they're not nice caterpillars, that's for sure. But it ultimately 99% of the time the trees live from it. They can take repetitive defoliation for 2 or 3 years. As probably the committee saw in one of the pictures that I had as an attachment, it showed a totally defoliated linden tree in town. And 2 weeks after watering it 2 or 3 times a week, it was completely leafed back out. So, I mean, trees are really resilient, and because of that, the province hasn't pushed any widespread funding or encouraged any spraying programs as such. It's been more up to the individual municipalities or conservation areas to promote that program and follow through with it. I mean, as I said in the report, a couple of the conservation authorities actually did do some spraying, but more from an economic point of view. It's because they rely on those forest canopies for camping or treetop trekking or something like that. So from our point of view, we are certainly looking into more of a robust campaign around communication. We've had some further discussion since I've written this report, just about how we would and do more of a larger burlap campaign, and how we would get it out. So we're thinking of coordinating it as part of the cleanup in the spring. That's an ideal time. Lots of people are out, probably having just a drop in at the JOC again, where you can pick up your burlap kits. We will be attaching, this year was kind of a quick pull together to see what we could do with the resources that we had. But this year we'll have more time to plan. There will be a flyer attached with all sorts of information that residents can take home. And as you said, attached to a QR code. Scan it, get some video information. We'll be pushing out some more information specific to residents, especially about removal of the egg masses. As you said, it's a pretty easy task. Just this week, actually, we started tackling, we don't have a whole lot of resources to do it, but we just started tackling a few trees to see whether burning them would work. We'd heard through some other municipalities that they were just using some small butane torches. Obviously, it needs to be done by somebody who understands not to hold the torch too long in one place, and we wouldn't recommend it to residents. But we've been really successful. We can achieve mass coverage of quite a few trees in a day, and it moves along fairly quick. The only thing we're limited to is that we can only get so far up into the canopy of the tree, right? But even from removal from a manual way where they vacuum them, they can only get, you know, in that 12, 10-foot range. And that's what I've indicated in my report when I speak to it. That would be using a contractor and a specialized vacuum to actually vacuum them out of the tree. So we're thinking that potentially we may have some resources on staff, you know, in the winter months to maybe mobilize and do specifically some of the really hotspot streets like Tradewind Terrace, McClenny Drive. Those were terribly infected streets, and if we can get down some of our target streets where there are significant populations of oak and Norway maples and lindens, they seem to like those three on our streets the best. We're going to try to mitigate some of that, and potentially that cost for removing egg mass would be significantly lower if we could supplement with some of our own staff, and maybe we don't even need a contractor to facilitate that. I think the tree watering was really effective. We have 3 watering tanks within the town, and we had a couple students, and they were out watering street trees on some of these highly defoliated streets. And as you could see from the picture, like, the trees rebounded miraculously very quickly, and that goes a long way. So they're very resilient, and I think we can achieve what we want without doing any spraying, which obviously comes with a high price tag and a lot of public resistance because they don't necessarily understand that it's a natural product, it's safe, but on the other flip side of it, it doesn't just affect just LDD caterpillars. So there is a negative to it. The trees in applications, we did do injections into the trees, and just for the group, it's the same product that's used for emerald ash borer. It's injected right into the stem. So it's specific, it's targeted. So if there's only LDD in the tree, there may be the odd other caterpillar, but it's targeted. It's not a blanket spray where it's getting over everything in the forest canopy down on the understory. So it was really effective. We did it on all of our mature oaks that were, when they're older and more susceptible to disease or recovery, those are the ones that you want to target. So, for example, we did the one in front of the cultural center, it's a couple 100-year-old oak. So it was a perfect candidate, and it had some LDD on it, but it never got defoliated. And so we thought that was a great option. So we'll be continuing with that next year as well.
Thanks, Sarah. And I guess I did do a lot of work on this because I did have my aunt who had kind of reached out to me. Just a quick backstory. She owns 200 acres. They bought their land and built their house from scratch and planted their forest. And so she was in tears because she was watching 200 trees completely decimated. So she had reached out to me. She lives out in Tweed, so it's not in Aurora, but it just kind of led to an overall Ontario kind of collaboration with other conservation authorities. I reached out to the Ministry of Natural Resources, Ministry of Environment, and I think I forwarded you as much stuff as I possibly could from all the answers that I got. And it seemed that the majority of the conservation authorities and a lot of the discussion really did shy away from the BTK or the spray for the reasons that we just kind of talked about. So, and at first I was not really convinced with the whole egg mass survey because I wanted to kind of really see these results, but I have now, I feel more comfortable just seeing the recoup with the water and the education is possible. So, that's good news. And then they were also talking about that, and I think it's NPV virus. And so I wasn't really, again, quite sure what that was, or if that was, I don't want to say true, but kind of like, is this really going to happen? Or is this an exponential year? And sure enough, just for the record, because I noticed in your report, you didn't have any sightings of it. I did have that. I did see that on my tree with some of the caterpillars. So I am in Town Park area, just so you know. So it was in that area. I did have that MPV virus. So it did in fact work. So I'm happy about that. I'm happy about the tree watering. I don't know if anybody else has any comments or questions. I know I've kind of taken the show a little bit, but just sharing my story. Ashley?
I just wanted to add, because I know that Sarah had said that they're going to be putting a kit together, just with a QR code, even that shows the general public all the different stages of the not just the caterpillar, but then the moth, the egg mass, and then even to its cocoon, so that the general public just knows what is okay to kill. Because it's not just the caterpillar that we want to, you know what I mean? Just some more education so that they can kill it at any stage as long as they can identify it. So
yeah, no, absolutely.
Thanks, Ashley. Sam? I think you're on mute, Sam. There you go.
Oh, okay. Just a quirky idea, because Maya has found out about the burlap from Aurora when I was out. So what I did was went to a local coffee roaster in Newmarket because they had too many coffee bags that are made of burlap for free. And they were like, please just take our coffee bags. But I'm wondering if, not replacing the town's burlap, but I'm wondering if I don't know, you can't tell them about partnerships, but if you could put the burlap kits in the burlap bag, because it seems like they have too many and they're local businesses. And anyway, just maybe and then if they need more burlap, they can cut up the bag.
Good point, Sam. Anybody else? Councillor Gardner?
A question to Sarah. We worked on this in 2020. there was a pretty big infestation down around Steeplechase area. And so that was pretty bad in 2020. And it was worse in 2021, I think. And so now we're going to go into 2022. So I don't know. Do you know what the egg masses look like already? I think we know in the fall, don't we?
Yeah, so through you, Madam Chair, the region has a number of plots identified down in the Hunters Glen, Elderberry Trail area, Steeplechase. So they have had their consultant Bioforest doing egg mass counts. They've just completed them recently for all the municipalities. So we don't have the data on the egg mass. Though I did get recently some updated information from the region, which wasn't available when I wrote the report. They did a defoliation comparison from 2020 to 2021 and revisited all the plots that we had provided them. So based on their projections from the egg mass counts in 2020 and then comparing the defoliation from 2021, they established that in where they had predicted we were supposed to have severe infestation, it was about 40% infestation, but we actually had 56. So their counts were, or their estimations were a little bit off. But granted, you have to consider that they're just doing a plot. They're not doing large tracts. So it's specific to whatever that plot was. But in all the other categories from medium to light infestations, they were all down from the previous year. So based on just that initial information from the defoliation plot investigation in August, they anticipate that we're on the downturn. So 2022 will more than likely be the last year that we're going to see any kind of infestation. Maybe 2023, some minor little pockets, but the other good thing to note is on the NPV, they did find it in Shepherd's Bush and they did find it down on Hunters Glen. So it is in town, and I did pick up 2 massive Rubbermaid containers from Newmarket of NPV infected caterpillars, and I spread them around in Case Woodlot and Shepherd's Bush and gave them to some homeowners who had some particularly nasty infestations. So hopefully we've added to the NPV. It is a naturally occurring virus. I will describe and equate it to COVID. It really is COVID for caterpillars. So it is the one thing that knocks the populations down, and that's what we're seeing throughout the region, because every municipality in the region had NPV to some degree. So next year they figure it'll spike. So we should be in good shape. So once I have the egg mass counts, which I should have shortly, that'll be in the information that I provide to council in their update.
Thank you. This is kind of ridiculous. Well, I don't know if it's ridiculous, but I mean, does anybody sell these caterpillars so that homeowners could buy the infected? I mean, for some of the homeowners, they're just, if a lot of trees were infected, it was terrible.
Yeah, so through you, Madam Chair, University of Guelph was actually doing some research on it. We actually had quite a number of, because it was late in the season when the NPV was discovered in Newmarket. It was towards the end of July. So when we picked them up, I mean, they were getting ready to pupate, or it already started to pupate. So we didn't really know how effective our spread of it would be. But that being said, there were a large number of dead ones actually in the containers. So we have frozen them in our freezer. And we were just going to do our own little experiment of grinding them up and then dispersing them, because the virus can live overwintering. We knew that. So we were going to spread it just manually in the spring in some hotspot areas once they hatched. But then I brought it up at our regional forestry meeting, and York Region Forester, they said that University of Guelph was actually doing some work on that. So similar thing, grinding them up and using them to disperse some virus. So I think, you know, long term, there'll probably be something on the market potentially that'll help
Thank
spread
you.
the virus. So
Do we know if that virus affects any other insects?
no, from what I understand, it's very specific to LDD.
That's just an amazing story. Thanks.
Yeah, well, Mother Nature's a wonderful thing.
Sometimes.
Yeah,
No, Mother Nature's just really angry with us at the moment,
as of late.
as of late. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, Cal.
Welcome.
Thank you. That was great news. I'm glad to hear that. We're innovative. I love it. Anybody
Yeah,
else
good
have any
too.
comments? No, we're good. My only last comment I forgot to mention about the egg masses, just for educational purposes. I did take them off my brick wall and eaves troughs and my house. So they're not just located on trees.
Oh.
And so people can, you know, take them off on their own property as well as a preventative measure. So just wanted to throw that out there. All right, well, without further ado, if there's no other questions or comments on LDD, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Wow, we actually got through this whole agenda on a good time. So that's great. We have no additional items. And so that leads me to a motion to adjourn. Colin, Crystal, perfect. That's great. Thank you so much. And before we leave, I want to wish everybody a happy holiday. I'm not going to see you again until February, so please enjoy your family time. And I guess we'll see you February. What was the date, Miss Keel? 23rd?
Third.
All right, so make sure you have that in your calendar and we'll see you then. Take care.
Thanks,
Night, everyone.
everyone.